leaving the country. Anyway, and as I have indicated already, it is not just the Muslim world that should be worried about the current state of affairs. Rather, it is a cause of serious alarm for the entire world, because if the extremists who have gone abroad return to their countries of origin, it could lead to dire consequences and potentially great danger to that society. In terms of the reaction of the world leaders to ISIS, it has been pleasing to see that certain politicians and religious figures have chosen not to add fuel to the fire, but have instead made it clear that they do not believe that ISIS or any other terrorist group represent the true teachings of Islam. For example, during a recent speech in Washington, President Obama said very clearly that the terrorists were betraying their religion and had no link with Islam. Just a few days ago, the Catholic Archbishop of New York also spoke openly against the notion that Islam justified the terrorist activities of groups like ISIS. And here in Europe, certain broad-minded politicians and religious leaders have also reacted responsibly to the terrorist attacks falsely perpetrated in the name of Islam. For example, in January, as I'm sure you will all be aware, terrorists attacked the offices of the magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris. It was a horrifying attack and completely against the teachings of Islam. When the issue of free speech arose in the days that followed, Pope Francis said that we should not provoke one another or insult each other's faith. He said that the dignity of each faith and religion should be respected and that we should speak for the common good. He very rightly said, as has been said by our respected guest, Shaban McDonald, that if even his very good friend uttered a bad word against his mother, he should expect a punch in return. In my personal view, this was a very wise and intelligent statement and an effort by the Pope to support religious freedom and tolerance. Anyway, in terms of extremism, let it be absolutely clear that wherever and whenever anyone seeks to justify their hate-filled atrocities or injustices in the name of Islam, they should be condemned. Let it also be very clear that such acts have no relation whatsoever to the true and peaceful teachings of Islam. As I alluded to earlier, I do not believe that policymakers and governments are currently taking all the necessary steps required to stop extremism. In my view, it would be far more effective for the major powers to support the local governments by taking them into confidence and seeking to build a relationship of mutual trust. Through close cooperation, a joint strategy should be formed to stop the spread of extremism and its hate-filled ideology. This will surely prove more effective than opposing the local governments by giving military training and weapons to the local rebels. Such policies can only further inflame the existing turmoil and tensions in those countries. Indeed, we have already seen the dangers and folly of this policy. Some time ago, certain major powers gave military training to members of the Syrian opposition. And it was later widely reported that many of those same rebels had taken their newly acquired arms and training and joined terrorist groups. Yet, despite this precedent, it has now been announced that thousands more Syrian rebels are going to be given military training in Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. I believe it would have been far more constructive for the major powers to build bridges with the local governments and to help them end the terrorism in their countries. This support could have been given on the condition that the respective governments guaranteed that they would serve their citizens fairly and would not usurp their rights in any shape or form. Where in Syria, Iraq, or certain other countries, the public have stood up against their governments, it has led to a power vacuum, which has been fully exploited by extremists to its great benefit. The civil disorder and lawlessness in those countries has allowed terrorist organizations to establish a foothold and created the perfect environment for them to flourish. As I have said, people from Europe, Australia, even China, and other parts of the world have traveled across borders to join ISIS, and the repercussions of this will certainly be felt in Europe and the West. Therefore, there is no doubt that this is not just an issue of concern for the Muslim world, but rather it is a global issue and has the potential to increase conflict across the world. In short, the measures to curb extremism are proving ineffective. If we look at the case of Libya, just a few years ago, some powers helped the local rebels to remove the Gaddafi regime. But what did this achieve? Has there been any benefit or improvement in the lives of Libyan people? Certainly not. Rather, that country has been left devastated, divided, and in ruins. It has become a breeding ground for terrorism and instability. It is said that even Gaddafi's hometown is now under the control of terrorists linked to ISIS, and this town is only 300 miles from Italy's coast. Thus, analysts have said that in this way, extremists have now virtually reached doorstep of Europe. If we look at Eastern Europe, there are radicalized individuals who are not only going to Syria and Iraq, but are also traveling to join terrorist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Indeed, Pakistan and Afghanistan have long been extremely unstable countries where terrorism and extremism have been prevalent. This too is a continuous cause of great concern. Then, if we turn towards Africa, terrorist groups such as Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab are acting entirely against the teachings of Islam by perpetrating the most barbaric cruelties. The ramifications and effects of this will not remain confined to these African countries, but rather will be felt in the wider world. And it is not just in the Muslim world that we see disorder and conflict. For example, the situation in Ukraine remains unresolved and highly dangerous. Although a tentative ceasefire was recently signed, a further escalation of the conflict and a future war cannot be ruled out. The major powers would be unwise to underestimate the threat posed by that region. Much has been written and said about how more than 25 years after the end of the Cold War, political tensions and other serious issues have engulfed the region once again. The economic situation being one of them, and this cannot be taken for granted. Another issue we are seeing is that various governments are increasing their military spending. For example, China's government recently announced that it was vastly increasing its military budget for the forthcoming year. However, its budget remains less than some of the other big countries. The point is that nations are competing with one another and seeking to outdo each other in terms of their defense spending. This race to increase military budgets is not without reason, but in fact, there are underlying motives behind it. If we truly want peace, then the United Nations and the major powers need to urgently tackle these issues in a just and fair manner. If we observe the situation in the Middle East, it is clear that the hatred and hostility between Israel and Palestine is continually increasing, and at frequent intervals, this enmity erupts into senseless violence and bloodshed. Then we are all aware that relations between Israel and Iran are highly volatile. For a long time, there has been a complete lack of trust, and mutual hostilities seem to be increasing on a daily basis. In short, the vast majority of the world is engulfed in a state of disorder and conflict. Regrettably, the world has failed to devise an effective plan or strategy to free mankind from this desperate state. Underlying issues and root causes are being ignored, or at least not given the serious attention they require. Every country believes that its policies are right and that others are in the wrong. Many countries believe that